Everyone has like a little bit more life to them, I feel like. I can like see it in your face, like it's coming. I wrote it up there, I'm sure you didn't need the reminder, but just in case. So we have Monday through Friday off next week, and then we have that Monday afterward off, the 31st. So it's kind of like a week and a half, right? So that's really exciting. Hopefully it's a nice chance to relax and kind of reset and do something fun. Ideally, eat something fun. I don't know, do both. Have something fun, eat something fun, all of it. I also want to throw out there too that you have your second homework assignment. It's not due till like mid-April, but some of them involve field trips, like going somewhere. So if you have some extra time, what a wonderful time to like go to one of those sex shops, right? For you, take someone with you, right? Make it a fun thing and make a date, or why not? But if you wanted to do one of the things that requires a little extra like time and effort, maybe consider it in the next like week and a half, and then you can write about it later. But like the sex shops, or going condom shopping, the birthday shopping, a few of them require a little bit more like planning and time. So just to put that out there, in case you're looking for something to do over break, right? I could give you an excuse to go to a sex shop in Hollywood, I guess. But otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful break. And then when we come back, it'll be April, which is hard to believe. We're going to jump into chapter 3 today. So we'll do 3 today, which is communication. And then when we come back, it'll be chapter 7 on love and intimacy. So very connected to the film, right? Kind of themes of communication and falling in love and some of those things that came up. So building on that, and then I'm talking about some of the research and kind of trends here as well. So we'll look at communications and differences between stereotypical male and female communication, some unsuccessful communication patterns, and just themes related to that. Okay. So communication is conveying information to another person, right? So it can be done verbally. It can also be done non-verbally. We communicate a ton in the things that we say, but we can also communicate quite a bit without words. Like body language speaks volumes. Have you ever had somebody like walking up to you and you can tell the mood they're in just from the way they hold their body? Like, oh, he's in an awful mood, or they're in a great mood, or you can tell stuff from the way people hold themselves, their eye contact or lack of eye contact. There's a lot that it gives us. It fills in a lot of gaps in the things that we say. We're going to focus mainly on verbal communication patterns, but nonverbal communication is huge. And we can often get a lot of information. We can fill in those gaps. Communication is one of the things that tends to correlate the most with relationship success. When people don't communicate with each other or don't communicate well, it tends to be a problem. Maybe not right away, but it tends to be something that can interfere. If you're not able to like vocalize your needs and vocalize your concerns with a partner, it can often have a dramatic impact on how long the relationship lasts. And we're talking about this with the folks in the film, right? That they weren't all great communicators, right? And that definitely can get in the way. When I was looking at a nonverbal communication, I found all these images. I had to limit myself. There were so many of them. But again, you can tell so much from just nonverbal stuff, right? Like a couple that's like smiling and touching each other versus backs to each other and arms crossed. Right? They communicate volumes without saying anything, or like smiling, open, facing each other, like eye rolling and things like this are contempt, which tend to be signs of like negativity in a relationship. I found so many more. I have 4 more. I limited myself. In therapy, really fascinating. When I was a couples counselor for a period of time, you would always look at where do people sit when you let them sit anywhere in an office. It's the most interesting piece of information that happens instantly. A couple walks into an office, there's a couch and 2 chairs. Do they pick the chairs? Do they pick the couch? Do they sit next to each other on the couch touching, or at opposite ends of the couch? Are their arms crossed, or are they open? You could tell so much about a relationship instantly in that choice, right? And sometimes it's personal preference, but it oftentimes communicates familiarity and comfort and intimacy with a partner based on what people would choose. Last one, obviously, smiling, happy, open, eye rolling is a really like negative sign. We'll talk about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse when it comes to communication patterns, and eye rolling tends to be one of them. It's a sign of contempt and like dismissiveness of a partner. So just, again, nonverbal stuff can be so crucial on top of all the other stuff that we're going to talk about today, which is much more verbal in nature. Couples counseling was my favorite. As a side note, when I was a therapist or training to be a therapist, it was always so fascinating, but so scary. Like I always hoped they didn't kill each other like on the way home, right? Like they would open everything up and then you'd send them out and be like, I hope I see you next week. But always so interesting, especially where they would sit. So one of the big themes in this chapter is gender stereotypes. We're gonna talk a lot about stereotypes of gendered communication, which came up a lot in the film that we watched, all those like, you know, if a guy likes you or doesn't like you, and like the things men versus women do. This is a field that we call genderlect, right? Instead of dialect, it's genderlect. It's the kind of differences between the ways that men and women communicate. And there was a really cool scene of this Wednesday, if you've seen that show. There was a scene in there that kind of highlighted this, and I recorded that little part to play for you. I thought it was such a good example of how like communication can be so different stereotypically between men and women. So let me to make it clear, right? And there's so many little things like that that have been studied in these like nuances between the ways that men and women stereotypically tend to communicate. Now we're kind of focusing on gender here. So maybe more than saying men and women, like masculine versus feminine tendencies in communication. But a couple of famous researchers related to this, and I have their books, I'll pass them around in case you're interested. They're both very like easy reads, but they're interesting. And the first one is the one that's up here by a doctor named Deborah Tannen. Deborah Tannen is kind of the more scientific one of the two that we'll talk about. And she's the one who coined the term genderlect. And she talked a lot about these fundamental differences and how they can really lead to issues in relationships when people communicate differently. And when you've been with someone a while, even if it's a friend or a family member, you kind of learn them and you adapt to the way they communicate and you pick up on these things. But in new relationships, especially, these can be problematic. And so some of the things that she talked about, women tend to be more driven toward rapport talk and men report talk. So women tend to be more focused on rapport, relationships with other people. They're more worried about connection and relationship. Men tend to focus on reporting. Here are the facts. Here's the information you need to know. And that's one kind of key thing that she noted. Women are much more likely to use things like tag questions, disclaimers, and hedge words. A tag question is when you ask a question at the end of something, right? Like, it's really warm out today, isn't it? Right? Like you kind of put that at the end. And one of the reasons she proposed that women do that is because it's more rapport, right? You're not trying to establish a fact. You're more worried about the connection and relationship with another person. So tag questions are when you ask a question after, right? Isn't it right? Right? Like you're kind of clarifying. Disclaimers are when you say things like, I might not be right, but I think it's hot outside, right? Or I'm not sure, but I think, right? You kind of have this little disclaimer before whatever you say. And women are much more likely to do that rather than assert a fact or assert themselves. And then hedge words are things like kind of, sort of, maybe, right? Where you tend to throw those in to communication much more than men tend to. So kind of facts and status for men and relationships and rapport and connection for women being primary focuses. She, very connected to that, talked about women being more focused on community and connection, and men contest, asserting dominance, asserting power, asserting status. So those were some of the like kind of key ideas in her book, the one who kind of coined this term genderlect. The other one that's a little more popular and maybe a little less scientific is the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus book. Now, this is an older book, but it is so popular when it comes to gendered communication. And the author, Dr. John Gray, also a doctor, talked a lot about this metaphor of men and women being from different planets, right? This like idea that he used as a metaphor that we're from different planets, so we don't know how to communicate with each other. I want to play the intro to the book for you. It's there's no visual, it's just audio. But I think it's a really, it sets the premise for the book. They got tired of waiting for me. Now I have to remember my password. No, okay, hold on. Too many passwords. This is why I loaded ahead of time. There we go. Okay. So let me play this for you. It's just a couple of minutes, but this is the introduction to this book. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And I think it's a kind of an interesting concept that he's proposing.
Harper Audio presents Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus by Dr. John Gray. Imagine that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. One day long ago, the Martians, looking through their telescopes, discovered the Venusians. Just glimpsing the Venusians awakened feelings they had never known. They fell in love and quickly invented space travel and flew to Venus. The Venusians welcomed the Martians with open arms. The love between the Venusians and Martians was magical. They delighted in being together, doing things together, and sharing together. Though from different worlds, they reveled in their differences. They spent months learning about each other, exploring and appreciating their different needs, preferences, and even behavior patterns. For years, they lived together in love and harmony. Then they decided to fly to Earth. In the beginning, everything was wonderful and beautiful, but the effects of Earth's atmosphere took hold. And one morning, everyone woke up with a peculiar kind of amnesia, selective amnesia. Both the Martians and Venusians forgot that they were from different planets and were supposed to be different. And one morning, everything they had learned about their differences was erased from their memory. And since that day, men and women have been in conflict. Without the awareness that we're supposed to be different, men and women are at odds with each other. We mistakenly assume that if our partners love us, they will react and behave in certain ways, the way we react when we love someone. Men mistakenly expect women to think, communicate, and react the way men do. Women mistakenly expect men to feel and communicate and respond the way women do. We've forgotten that men and women are supposed to be different. As a result, our relationships are filled with unnecessary friction and conflict. Clearly recognizing and respecting these differences dramatically reduces confusion when dealing with the opposite sex. When you remember that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, everything can be explained.
Okay, so obviously a little like oversimplified and filled with a lot of metaphor, right? But cool idea that men and women are supposed to be different. Now, this whole chapter is riddled with stereotypes, right? And overgeneralizations. Not everybody follows these patterns, but that's the premise of this book. Really easy and interesting read. He goes into some of the differences between men and women and then how that tends to affect relationships. So some of his kind of big ideas, listening versus offering advice. This is a big one that he talks to. Some of you are smiling and nodding, right? This is a big one that he talks about in terms of like a relationship pattern that leads people into problems or like into trouble. That women oftentimes just want to be heard and for someone to listen to them. And men tend to want to solve things and offer advice. And so this is a common fight that couples, heterosexual couples, or like maybe people who fit a masculine, feminine pattern tend to follow. That I just want you to listen to me, stop trying to fix it. Right? Or I just want you to listen, stop like interrupting me and offering advice. And on the male side, wanting to just, well, I can take care of that for you. I can make it better. Right? And so it's a very common struggle that men and women tend to approach issues and conversations in slightly different ways that can lead to problems. And sometimes I have to ask this of my partner. I'll be like, do you want me to just listen? Or do you want me to like try and fix it for you? Because my natural tendency is like, I can fix that. Like I can fix that now. Let's go, right? And my partner will be like, I just wanted you to listen, right? And so like, I've gotten really good at like, wait, before you start, do you want me to listen or do you want me to fix it, right? And like, and that's a really common one that people can get trapped in. Another one, when people have conflict, men tend to want to retreat to their caves and be alone and be by themselves. And women tend to want to talk and seek that like working through something. And that can be a problem in relationships again, where men retreat and pull away in moments of conflict versus women tend to want to like get into it and talk about it and work through it. Another one that he said is that men are like rubber bands and women are like waves, and that can be a problem. So men will get close and then they pull away, but they'll only go so far before they snap back, right, and come back to the situation. Versus women tend to be more like waves and they ebb and flow depending on the moment and on their mood. And so sometimes these differences can lead to issues. And there are so many more. These are like the big ones from these books. But a lot of researchers studying the subtle ways in which like masculine and feminine communication patterns can present themselves, right? And I guarantee a lot of you can think of moments maybe in relationships, some of you smiling as we were talking about these. We had this moment yesterday in our relationship. We had like a gendered communication moment yesterday. And I was like, oh, I'm telling my class about this tomorrow, right? Like, I didn't tell my partner, but in my mind, I was like, I'm telling my class. So last night, we're having like our roof finished. And so they turned off our power, so we had to go out to eat. So I looked at my partner and I said, where do you want to go to eat? Like, that sounds good. Okay. You see where this is going? Like, some of you are laughing, right? And she's like, anywhere sounds fine. In my head, I'm like, I'm screwed. Right? Right there. I know I'm doomed, right? Anywhere sounds fun. It's like, okay, great. How about Don Cuco's? Like, I love Mexican food. I was like, let's go to Don Cuco's. Not really in the mood for Don Cuco's, she responds, right? I was like, okay, how about Chi-Chi's? I don't really want pizza. In my head, I'm like, okay, well, I gave you two options. Anything is fine was clearly not true, but okay. And then I proposed, what did I say next? I was like, how about Reds? We were there a few weeks ago. I was like, well, then at that point, I was like, where do you want to go? She's like, well, anywhere's fine. Like, clearly no, right? Like, I was okay. So how about like, and I pressed like 3 different places, right? I got a no to each one. I got a to each one of them, but anywhere is fine, right? And I'm like, just tell me where you want to go. I don't care, right? So eventually I was like, fine, we'll let the kids decide. And we ended up at McDonald's, right? Which is so frustrating because I could have gone to Dunkin' Donuts instead, right? But like, it was such a gendered communication moment of like, anywhere is fine. Like, read my mind and know where I want to go. And later she was like, I can't believe we ended up at McDonald's. I was like, we could have gone anywhere. Why didn't you, where did you want to go? And she's like, well, I thought Chili's sounded really good. Oh my God. You just tell me, right? Just tell me, we'll go to Chili's, right? I'm not a migrator. And so it's just these little subtle things. And like, it wasn't a fight, but it's just this moment of like disconnect, right? And it's really common that people have these moments in relationships and friendships and family relationships where you have these gendered communication patterns that can sometimes interfere, right? McDonald's, that's where we ended up. Yeah.
It sounds like it's more socialization than the natural state.
It could be. That's probably a big part of it, right? Like our culture has very strong like norms and socialization tendencies for masculine versus feminine or men versus women, right? And it was probably like, well, she didn't want to put it out there because what if I didn't want to go there? Right? Like it was probably to be kind, but it came across as like incredibly, like I'm recording this, incredibly obnoxious. So I feel like I should mute it, right? I don't want to have a fight. But like, not that she would ever want, but like it was just like one of those moments where it was probably not wanting to assert like dominance or like, this is what I want. And that could be a threat to connection if you look at the stereotype. So a lot of these like norms, can you think of other things? What are some like stereotypical things that women tend to do when they communicate? Can you think of any like off the top of your head, like stereotypical ways that women communicate? Yeah.
They kind of like don't say what they're thinking at first. Like if the guy's
Yeah.
like, are you okay? We're like, yeah, we're fine. Like we like when guys, I don't want to say like read our minds,
Sure.
but like we kind of want them to like know
Yeah.
that something is wrong.
Mhm.
So that instead of saying, oh, is everything okay? They say, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Like what happened?
I know something's wrong, right?
Like
Yeah.
we all, I don't wanna say we, but me personally,
Sure.
I'm always like, I'm fine.
Mhm.
I'm fine. And I like do little things that like make it clear that I'm not fine, but I want my boyfriend to know like, oh, she's not
Yeah.
fine. Like, let me get to the bottom.
Okay. And I love that you can know that. Again, fine is a dangerous word, right? Yeah.
kind of going off that.
Yeah.
You know, be like, wow, I would love some flowers. And oh, God, it's so cute. I would love this sweater. I'm just like staring at him. I'm like, this would be a perfect gift.
It's right here, here's the link to the website.
Yeah.
Okay, so kind of like some hints and so that, I would say that's pretty blatant, but yeah, we could still spread over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that like going on with both of them, I think it's just that I want, for me, I want my boyfriend to pull it out of me.
okay,
Like, it's like, I want you to dig, I want you to investigate, I want you to like, I don't know, go searching, go cave diving, I don't know, you need to do something. Like, you have to show that you care.
right, that would show that you care, right? Like that, like you find, you know that I'm not okay, you did, you did it because it shows that you care, right? Yeah,
I think part of it, and feel free to tell me if this doesn't fit any of what you guys just said. I think part of it is just the feeling of, I want to test if you care enough to try or to put effort into this thing
okay,
that I have multiple times said I like, will want. That way, in the future, when things go down the line, if it's like, oh, can you clean this up? I don't have to tell you 17 times for you to understand it.
okay, fair, right, yeah,
I was gonna say, that goes back to what I was saying about like socialization is
Yeah.
also like, because women are kind of trained from a young age to like know what other people are feeling. I think we also expect that of our partners, and then are just like really frustrating. That's like, clearly this is what I'm upset about, and you're not getting it, and the fact that they're not, I think is frustrating. Yeah, and I think that that's maybe also where it kind of falls into.
okay, you want to respond to that, yeah?
I think, also tying to that, I think if you have two people who were socialized with that, they get very used to that concept.
Sure.
So it's like, well, if all of my female friends can do it, then why can't you?
Okay, anything else, any other thoughts, yeah?
I was just realizing that so I have a younger sister, and she falls more into the category of like, kind of like what you were saying, like she'll be visibly grumpy and she'll be like, I'm fine, like, not really, she just like isn't ready to talk about it yet, and that's fine. I just fine. But anyway, so I was always like, I'm not gonna keep pushing, like, if she's not ready to talk about it.
Yeah.
So when I got into a relationship, I was just already in the mindset of like, I'm not gonna make you guess, because I just already have that experience. And sometimes my boyfriend's actually the like girl in that sense, like,
Right.
and I'm like, I'm not gonna guess what you're feeling, like, you need to come to me and if something's bothering you, because I feel like since I usually do that, then I expect the same from him, and we've gotten better with that. So I definitely think that like your personal relationships outside of like romantic relationships can definitely.
Yeah, the way you grow up with your family, your siblings, what's been normalized to you, like those play a big role. And then I love how you're saying like when you have been with somebody, whether it's a friend or a family member or a partner, you learn them a little bit, right? And you start to learn a little bit what they want, right? And you can kind of learn to meet each other in the middle, or like change some of the patterns if they're problematic, but it can take a while to get there. And in the early stages, that can be devastating, yeah.
I have a similar experience, like with my ex, like he'd be visibly upset.
Yeah.
When I asked him like, hey, what's wrong? Are you okay? He said like, it's nothing. And then he'll shoulder me like the rest of the day.
Yeah,
When it's very obviously something.
Sure.
And we just like never talk about it.
yeah,
And so like, I used to try to make him feel better even when I didn't know what was wrong. And then it just ended up being so long and so like mentally burdening for me, I just gave up.
yeah, right, okay, then I'll believe you then, right? Yeah, and that can be challenging too.
I super relate to like then go to their caves and then want to talk.
Yeah.
My boyfriend is the type that he wants to like sort himself out before he wants to talk to me. That's like what we've kind of gotten to that pattern where it's like, if I'm upset about something, I can tell him right away.
Yeah,
But I usually have to wait like a little bit for a response because he wants to like really think about what he wants to say and like emotionally process. Like he's like, I'm gonna go in my room and journal. And I'm like, go ahead.
all right.
Journal.
It's so funny because that's the one where my partner and I are like flipped. Like when if we have any kind of argument, I'm like, I don't want any space. Like, let's sit here and talk about it. And my partner will be like, no, I'm gonna sit here in a room by myself and gather my defense, right? Like, she's scared if I give her too much time, right? So like, I've learned it took me like 18 years to be able to do this, because I'm not a space person. Like, I don't give space well. Like, I can own that about myself. But like for her, when she's upset, she needs space. But if I give her too much space, it's dangerous for me. If I don't give her enough space, it's dangerous for me. So I've learned like 2-3 minutes, and then I can go back and test the waters and see if I need to give a few more minutes of space. And like, she used to like go and lock a door, and that would freak me out. And so like after like 10 years, we learned to navigate that one. Like, you learn to navigate these things. But it's interesting, where like sometimes we'll even flip on certain areas. Like, it doesn't have to be across everything. And I love that, like, I'm gonna go journal and we'll figure it out. Like, okay, take your time. But people don't always deal well with space, right? But some people need it, some people don't, yeah.
You know, it's not like, for me, like, I would like to use the like my friends or something, and, I go to them to him, and I'm like, oh, no, you won't believe she didn't do this, and I just thought, he's just like sitting there like, oh, whatever, so, that's fine, I'm like, feeling paranoid, and then that starts to constantly like, why don't you care, like, he just did not tell me what I'm doing to do, and they did one person to her, and then you find that it's about her,
Yeah, yeah. Interesting, and like the different recovery times, and like, men and women stereotypically also tend to move on from conflict in various ways too. Some are likely to bury it and move on, and others like, well, we just like deal with it real quick and we're good, right? Like, tomorrow will be fine, maybe for you, right? But that's an interesting one too, yeah.
Yeah, especially when we have boyfriends and family, because we come from like very different households.
Yeah.
And his family loves to talk about everything then and there,
Mhm.
but my family's kind of more like get pretty heated and then just act like it didn't happen. So I would have to always leave the situation just so I could calm down and say stuff, like I wouldn't regret later. And then so that was kind of what we would have to do. And then, oh yeah, it was kind of what she was saying, like sometimes my boyfriend won't see, or I guess feel that the argument was as important as I did. And it was like this funny thing that we would do where I would call everything a fight and be like, oh no, it wasn't a fight, it's just like a small disagreement.
Mhm.
And I'm over here like, I was on the verge of tears the entire time.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like
Different
that.
experiences.
Yeah.
And then again, that family of origin plays such a role, like in what was normal to you and what you grew up with, and then what they grew up with, and then you have to find the middle ground. How about men, stereotypically? Like, we kind of getting there, like, what are some things that men tend to stereotypically do? Yeah,
I'm not sure if this is like this, but he's like super monotone.
okay.
So it was like really hard trying to navigate, figuring out, are you excited or are you like, what's going on?
Okay.
Because I'll be like, oh, are you excited? Because I got us like concert tickets for blah, blah, blah. You'd be like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Really, it's awesome. Like,
I need more than that. Uh-huh. Okay, all right, so kind of like a little more like less emotional, or like a little more monotone, flat, yeah. Mhm.
I would train or I would be like, and I think, no, we need to talk about this, we need to talk about this. I'm like, okay, let's put that. It's similar with this one monotone. So it's like, do you even like you? Yeah, I like you. Like, of course I like you.
Yeah.
Like, but it's like, oh, well, it just doesn't seem like it. Like, you don't seem as excited to see me.
Sure.
It's like, I've seen that on both ends of dating, where it's like, I've been dating a guy and it's been like, oh my God, did I do this? Because you kind of realize afterwards, and it's like, you definitely switch on your words.
And then some of the like actions versus words can be a big one for people, like stereotypically men tend to be about actions. Where women want actions or words, like it can be kind of like this interesting dynamic there too, yeah.
I think that sometimes like communication with men can be a little contradicting because they're very much like problem solving kind of like communicators.
Right.
Like if I'm talking about a situation with one of my girlfriends to my boyfriend, And I'm like, oh my gosh, she did this, like, I'm so pissed off, well, he's like, okay, so talk to her about it.
Mhm.
He doesn't like go along with the rant with me, like one of my other girlfriends would. He's
Okay.
just like straight to solving the
So
problem.
we'll go deal with it.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
But
okay.
then when we have a fight, he's very much like, I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go home. And then the next day, he's like, okay, do you wanna talk?
Hmm.
So it's like,
Interesting.
when you're ranting about like personal problems to a man, they're very much like, okay, let's figure out the issue. But then when it's you and him doing the fighting, he's like, I need a minute. Like,
Okay.
we'll talk later. So
Interesting.
it's like really like contradictory. It's really weird. But,
Yeah.
I mean, it works for him. So.
Okay, yeah.
For me, I have like a really like overly masculine communication style where it like kind of isn't good in relationships sometimes. So I'm not good at like verbal affirmations, like telling my partner like how much they mean to me. I'm always like doing things for them and like expressing my feelings for them like in actions and whatnot. And
Okay.
so that can be tricky if your partner doesn't want that. You
Yeah,
know?
for sure.
And
for
so I
sure.
think I've noticed that as well, where as like just sort of a more masculine thing is not, you know, it like you were saying with your boyfriend, like how he, you know, isn't like overly expressive, you know, with his emotions and things.
Sure.
Like that. So,
Okay, okay. I think you were next, yeah.
I've noticed that like men and guys are like really bad at collecting information. if
Okay.
that makes sense. Like, my mom will come home from hang out with her friends and we get an update of the past like 6 months of their lives, what their kids are doing, what they're doing.
Yeah,
Any drama that's gone on and like what caused that drama. And then like when my dad gets home from like a poker night or something with his guy friends, like, what'd you guys talk about? I don't know, like,
stuff.
this guy's getting a divorce. Oh, why are you divorcing? I don't know. And then so it's
Yeah, sure.
and then up to current, but with guys, if there's a space in between, I feel like they just continue from the present and just move forward.
Okay.
If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And it's that, again, that community and context thing, right? Where like, I got the important information, there's something happening. Yeah, like that's all I needed to know versus like, tell me everything, right? Yeah.
I like talking about my boyfriend. But he's like it's so funny because now that we started dating, I've started to figure like we kind of not.
How do you talk to women, kind of feeding off these stereotypes that we talked about? Let me get back to, well, I guess that was our slide there. So just kind of pulling them together, let me put that back on. So lots and lots of these different things. And again, they don't always apply to everyone. Like everyone is kind of in their own place with all these different things, but they've been really well researched, really commonly talked about, and they're big issues when it comes to communication in relationships. So those were the two movies. I have one more clip in a minute from another movie related to all this. But one other thing that we sometimes talk about when it comes to like sexual communication here. So communication specifically related to sex, and then also revealing yourself in a relationship. One popular theory that's talked about a lot is the onion theory of communication, right? That when it comes to meeting someone and getting to know them, you have to reveal yourself in layers like an onion, right? If you reveal too much too quickly, people will run. If you don't reveal enough after enough time, people will think that you don't like them or you don't want to get close to them, and they often will run. So it's kind of this delicate balance of like how much you reveal and when. And really important piece of this, and this is something that makes people notoriously uncomfortable, is talking about your sexual history and preferences. And some of you, your face, your eyes went big, right? Like it's interesting, like people hate to have these conversations, but they're so important in relationships, right? To talk about like your preferences when it comes to intimacy, right? Because everybody has a different level of preference, a different level of comfort. If you don't have these communications or these conversations, then you're basically going off of guesswork and past experience. And that could be problematic, right? And so if your partner is really into something and they don't tell you, how would you know that? And vice versa, right? And so really cool scene of this. If you've seen the movie I Love You, Man, there's a really good example of this in there about oral sex, right? And they never have this conversation, and it causes problems with their intimacy in their relationship. Hopefully it will work. We'll try again. Sometimes it's like the audio that that she's not like doing oral sex with him. And it comes up in the most awkward way, but now finally having that conversation, they work through it and talk about it, right? And so when you don't have those conversations with somebody, as uncomfortable as it might be to do, you don't know what they like or don't like. And that can make it tricky, right, when you're being intimate with them. And so learning how to make requests and share what you like or don't like, and avoid like sending mixed messages, say no when it's something you're not comfortable with. Those are all that like self-disclosure stuff can be really important. And he has like a moment in that clip where he grimaces, like thinking about her ex. That's kind of the mentality that I think most of us have. Like, I don't want to talk about my partner's ex. Like, I don't want to talk about my ex, right? Like from like forever ago. Like no one wants to talk about that stuff. But if you don't, it can make sometimes it can make that intimacy piece a little bit challenging, especially if people have triggers for them that might set them off in some kind of way that you need to be mindful of. So having that mutual empathy, having self-disclosure, revealing those things and putting out there what you like or don't like, having that sexual communication is just as important as having good communication just kind of globally. Last thing in this chapter, I love these pictures, right? This one down here, it looks like she's about to like eat him or something. I don't know. But two famous psychologists, Gottman and Gottman, it's a husband and wife team, that are both PhD level, like, clinical psychologists who study couples. They're kind of like the gold standard when it comes to couples therapy. The two of them have done extensive research on communication in typically married heterosexual couples, but in couples. And what they found was that there were 4 things that they called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Kind of an analogy here to the 4 horsemen that bring about the end of the world, right? Here, bringing about the end of the relationship. And so what they found in the research was that couples who had all 4 of these markers, where they could predict with like 95% certainty that they would divorce or break up, right? If they were unaddressed. So if the couple didn't find better ways to deal with these things, if they had all 4 of them, they could typically project and predict that they would not last as a couple. And those 4 things are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So a little bit of these things, like if you have some of these things in your relationship, it may or may not be an issue. But typically what the Gottman said is that they needed to be addressed or it could become a problem, especially if it escalated. So criticism would be when you attack your partner's personality or character. You always do this. You never do that, right? It's always is and nevers. It's their character instead of the moment. So maybe in the moment in that fight, you didn't do it this time. But instead of making it about that moment or that incident, you make it global and you attack their character instead of the situation. Right, it kind of puts a different level of criticism and pressure on it. And so it makes it the intent that one person is always right and the other is always wrong. They said that was one of the biggest ones. Criticism, global criticism of their character. Contempt, insulting or harming a partner, attacking your partner, like with eye rolling or sneering, like it could be verbal or nonverbal. But like hostile humor, mockery, sarcasm, all of those things to a degree were thought to be really unsuccessful or dangerous patterns of communication. Defensiveness, always seeing yourself as the victim, always turning it back around to yourself. Well, yeah, you might be saying that, but what about me? Right? And like always bringing it back to yourself instead of hearing their point or taking their side or trying to see their perspective. And then stonewalling, withdrawing from the relationship. Like, so a lot of people want space for a few moments, but people who kind of like ghost a partner or disappear for long periods of time or give them like a cold wall, that tends to be one that's also a problem. So these 2 therapists said that if a couple has these 4 things, they can turn them around. But if you leave them unaddressed, that it oftentimes will lead to a divorce or a breakup or more issues. Right, so not only do we have these like successful patterns or kind of things that we tend to see, but we also have unsuccessful communication patterns that can lead to a lot of problems. Oops, that was from another one. Any like other thoughts or comments? Any other, like, we have a little bit of time, like any other like examples or stories or thoughts or comments or anything related to like gender communication? Anything else that you were thinking about that maybe we didn't get to earlier? This is a really big one in relationships, right? And like I said, as a counselor, when I was doing therapy as a marriage and family therapist, it was one of the number one things that people came in for. Communication struggles are like the number one like fight that people have in relationships, typically followed by responsibilities and sex or intimacy. Those are the big three, right? And so oftentimes people who've been together a long time learn to navigate those things with each other, and they develop that comfort and like ability to communicate. But if you don't develop those skills in a relationship, they typically tend to get in the way. Right, and again, not only like in terms of general communication, but also sexual communication as well. So the next chapter that we'll look at is chapter 7. And I love chapter 7 because we get to do a couple of like little inventories, which I always think inventories are fun. I don't know if that's like the psychologist in me or not, but like we'll do a little love quiz, love styles quiz, an attachment styles quiz. We have a couple of those. Quiz sounds bad. Inventory, that doesn't sound so scary. So what we'll do, I'll stop here for today rather than start it, since spring break is so soon, and I appreciate that you were here. Traditionally, it's like the lowest attendance day of the year, like everyone's ready to start break today, but thank you for being here. So when we come back on the 2nd, we'll jump into chapter 7 on love and intimacy. Again, I would recommend if you wanted to do one of those field trip assignments, consider it over your long break. I hope you have a chance to relax, eat something delicious for yourself and for me, of course. Like, think of me if you eat something delicious. And I'll see you all in April. Yeah. In April, I can't believe it's almost April.